Good morning, fans of sports. We are excited here today at The Grueling Truth. Our guest today is a writer about sports, power, mostly focuses on the NFL, but he does cover other leagues for the New York Times. Our guest today is Ken Belson. We will be discussing his new book, Every Day is Sunday, how Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, and Roger Goodell turned the NFL into a cultural and economic juggernaut. It would be sure would be nice if every day was Sunday. I mean, gosh, who's going to turn down football every day? But then again, nowadays it kind of feels that there is football somewhere every day.
Yeah, that's a very deliberate strategy by the NFL, particularly Roger Goodell when he came in 2006, to turn the NFL into more of a media company that happens to produce football as its product and or as its programming, I guess you could say. And so, yeah, even in his tenure, which is coming up on 20 years, we've had the introduction of Thursday night football. We had international games, regulation international games being played increasingly now. We have obviously NFL Network has grown and now sold to ESPN, and then Skydance, which NFL did a deal with a sort of Hollywood production company to come up with more content, and that's why you see the 8 part or 10 part series on Jerry Jones, similar one with Robert Kraft through Apple TV, and yeah, it's they're just trying to fill in the calendar. And then even again in my time covering the league, the combine, you roll right out of the Super Bowl, and now you're into shoulder programming for the combine. Then there's the combine. Then you roll right into free agency. Then you finish with that, you're starting to talk about the draft. And my all-time favorite is they now have primetime viewing for the schedule announcement. So they're trying to fill in the calendar everywhere they can.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. That I mean, the NFL used to be what a 9 month a year, 6 month a year sport, where now it is definitely 12 months straight. There's always something going on. If it isn't the draft, it's free agency. Like you said, if it isn't, that, it's the schedule coming out. If it isn't, there's always something going on with the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, it's as I said, it's very deliberate. I mean, you think about it, the season itself is really just in one quarter of the year, right? The fourth quarter from Labor Day on. And then obviously the playoffs go into January and early February. That's not a very long season, certainly compared to baseball, which starts in February, ends now in November. Basketball seems to go on forever. Hockey starts a little early, but you're talking about hockey in September and all the way into June. So football, as it's played, is really not a long season, and that actually is the league's advantage in that there's scarcity, right? You don't, I see you're wearing a Reds hat. I'm full disclosure Mets fan, but it's a slog to get through the season, even in good years. When the team's doing well, you get to September and you're like, I need a break already, and then the playoffs start. So. It's a different business model. The NFL has tried not to saturate where they can. They did add a round of playoffs a couple of years ago, and they did add the 17th game. And I think we will get to 18, and the Super Bowl will eventually be on President's Day weekend. But that's about stretching the limits of how many games they can play.
So that's one of the ways the NFL has grown and evolved. What are some of the other ways the NFL has grown and evolved under Goodell?
Well, gambling is one. Excuse me. It's not Roger Goodell who's done it. The Supreme Court overturned legislation that had previously limited sports betting to Las Vegas. Once it went national, the NFL was ready. There's a scene in the book where Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, and Roger Goodell fly to Las Vegas in 2016. Now, this is almost 2 years before that law was overturned. It was known as PASPA. And they were talking with the county commissioners in Las Vegas, and the county commissioner told me later. He said, they never asked about gambling. All those warnings about the integrity of the game, they didn't care. I mean, players in Las Vegas with all those casinos, they didn't seem worried. All they wanted to know was, can Las Vegas support an NFL team, economically? So I think their minds were already there. Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft had invested in DraftKings before it went public. So, I don't want to say they believed in the product, but they knew gambling was coming. It's really changing the shape, not just of how fans, or excuse me, how the players are policed a lot more now, but also how fans view the NFL. And you've seen this pushback in other sports too, where it wasn't enough that, such and such kicker missed a field goal and screwed you over on your fantasy team. Well, now there's money running on it, running, and it's people's tempers and patience for the game have changed dramatically, as opposed to just watching a 3 hour saga. Now it's bet by bet. So that's definitely one change in Roger Goodell's time. The other is the international aspect. I don't know if the Bengals have played overseas much, but
They
we're going
played
to see more and more
twice.
international games. Once, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, some of the teams and the owners don't like it because they lose home games, but they are generally made whole when they go overseas, and the coaches don't really like it because it takes teams out of their rhythm. But the reality is the American population isn't growing as fast. And so, the NFL, like the other leagues, are in search of new fans and new marketing deals and new media deals. And the place to do that is in Europe, South America, Mexico. Next year, they're going to play a game in Melbourne, Australia.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Well, friend of the show, Tony Khan, his group definitely loves it. The Jaguars. Oh my gosh, yeah, they're always playing internationally.
yeah, yeah. Tony and his dad Shad are really unique. I mean, they're in one of the smallest markets in the league, and they Shad has businesses all over. He has a bumper and headlight business that where he made his fortune, Flexingate, and so he already was thinking internationally. He was born in Pakistan, came here at a young age. So he's got a unique worldview, no pun intended, and he saw the Jaguars. They could be London's team. And he told me years ago, one game at Wembley in London is 15% of his ticket gate for the entire season. So it was worth it to him to sub out a game from Jacksonville and move it to Wembley. And he has a carve out, a special deal where he plays there every year, no matter what the other schedule is. He has it as a permanent thing. And there were people worried that, oh, you're just going to move the team to London. I don't think that's happening. It's just not logistically feasible. And then also, moving to London, you actually, as a team in London, you put yourself at a disadvantage because now you got to come back to play U.S. teams. So
Exactly.
you get the time zones problem too. It's not just the teams who visit once a year. So I don't think we're going to see a team in London, but Shad has seen potential to build up a fan base in England and has been pretty successful at it.
So when did the NFL become the United States main game?
So as a the most popular sport, it's in the mid 70s, which seems really well. It's 50 years ago now. It had in fans' minds during fan polls. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, and baseball to me was still king. But really, the seeds of baseball's decline sort of started then. They were the first league to have free agency and they didn't have a salary cap. So what you had basically was the Yankees, the Dodgers, big market teams spending heavily for the biggest stars. I remember that first year, the Yankees got Don Gullett from the Reds and Catfish Hunter from the A's, and they just plucked up all the biggest stars that were immediately free agents, and it created a tremendous imbalance. And so I think that lack of parity, where you have these small market clubs that are constantly swimming upstream, I think that kind of hurt the game. Then you have the steroid scandals and then the lost season in 94 or 95. And the NFL just kept kind of trucking away. But in modern terms, and this is really where the book starts in 1993, they didn't really get their full foundation until the 1990s when the players got free agency, but we also got the salary cap, and that's the modern roster, right? You players move around, but you can only spend so much, and that created parity so that in any given year, the Bengals could show up in the Super Bowl thanks to Joe
Mhm.
Burrow and some great receivers. There's a lot of turnover. The only team that really has in the sort of salary cap era, the only team that's had I guess what we would call a dynasty is the Patriots. They're kind of the unicorn. They had the once in the generation quarterback. They had the coach, who knew how to manage the salary cap. So that was a very rare thing. It's going to be almost impossible to repeat that. But you have a nice turnover. You had the Rams win one year, Seattle went. Every team kind of has a bite at the apple. well, not the Jets, but most teams anyway. So, so yeah, that's that. I would say '93 was sort of the beginning of what we now understand to be the NFL, this sort of monolith that's taken over sports.
I really like what you were saying earlier about the NFL. If they add that extra game, then that'll turn things into what we all want, which is a holiday after the Super Bowl. So, yeah, because it's always felt like that next day, because productivity is so low, that there should be a national holiday.
Yeah, you got it right. I mean, the hangover on Monday after a big blowout, no matter who plays. I mean, that's the amazing thing about the Super Bowl is it truly is a national holiday on a Sunday, and that is part of the thinking. If you put the game on President's Day weekend and you automatically have Monday off,
Mhm.
well, think of, the parties people have or the travel plans people will make, and the broadcasters love this too. There's more things they could advertise, and so yeah, I think that's one of the thoughts here. The other sort of geeky has to do with Sweeps Week, which is when the networks sort of show off their upcoming shows, and then ad rates are partly based on this, and so it will also overwhelm the Academy Awards. Which is one. If you look at the top 100 shows every year, the Academy Awards is somewhere in
Yeah,
there.
it's usually in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's one of the few non-football, non-sports things out there, and the NFL would kind of swamp that too. So yeah, the NFL is sort of crazy like a fox when it comes to these things.
So, why has Goodell been the right person for the job of commissioner?
So Roger has probably the most unique resume possible for NFL commissioner. He spent his entire 45-year professional career there. Literally, when he was getting out of college, he wrote to his dad and he says, "My ultimate goal is to be NFL commissioner," which is kind of an interesting job search,
Yeah.
But he worked his way up. As you like to say, he was kind of a grunt early on. But he quickly made himself invaluable to the executives there, particularly in the 1990s when Paul Tagliabue was looking for a deputy to go over to Europe to try and build up international relations. He was the guy that owners would tap to go help solve a stadium problem. You need some public money. Roger was the guy who would go to City Hall on your behalf and talk to the mayor and try and figure out who the city council people like that. His dad was a senator and a congressman, so it probably came naturally to him to do that kind of work. So yeah, he was a problem solver for the owners. And when Tagliabue retires in 2006, Roger was really a very natural choice. Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft were on the committee to pick Roger, and all the owners knew him. Frankly, all the owners' kids knew Roger because they were about his age. Roger had even dated some of the kids of the owners, so he was a very natural guy. So he had the sort of operational knowledge. And then the second part of his job, and this is sort of something of a misconception people have, he's not really a CEO. He's not creating the vision for the league, although he has his own ideas on it. He is executing on the wishes of the 32 owners. And so in the book, I had one of the former executives at the NFL. He compared Roger not to a CEO, but to a Senate majority leader. He's always counting votes. Majority leaders, like, you've got different parts of his party, and so they're trying to get to a majority, whether it is in the NFL's case, it's got to be 24 out of 32, so 75%. So Roger's always listening. Where's the room shifting? What do people want to do on private equity? What do guys want to do on international? What do we want to do on gambling? All these different policies, even the tush push. Do we have enough votes for the tush push? Roger actually doesn't like the tush push, but it didn't pass, and that was a rare misstep on his part. There were enough owners who were in favor of keeping it. So, yeah, generally that's what he does. He's looking around, whether it's Jerry coming up with an idea or Jerry's got five owners with him and they're pushing for something, or Robert Kraft, whatever it is, there's different groups of owners. That's what Roger's strength is he listens and then he tries to gather votes.
Of course, the NFL owners are the elite of the elite, but I understand there are some times that there are even more elite meetings than that. So it seems like, of course, Roger, Robert, and Jerry are definitely in that room. But who else gets invited to those big meetings?
Yeah, there's like a core group of owners. There's Look, there's 32 owners. Yeah, I'll include the Packers here because team president is basically representing the team. There's about 12 owners who do a lot of the work for the league on the various committees, finance committee, media committee, and so forth. Jerry and Robert are very much involved. Shad Khan, you mentioned, he's very involved. John Mara, Art Rooney of the Steelers. There's about a dozen. Jimmy Haslam in Cleveland. And then there's about a dozen owners who are kind of get along owners. They do some work, but they're not super engaged. They're not trying to sway the room. They're on the committees. Steve Ross in Miami, for instance, Jeffrey Lurie in Philadelphia. And then there's a bunch of owners who, come to the meetings, have opinions, but aren't terribly active. Mike Brown,
Yeah.
frankly, is getting on the older side. His daughter Katie is active on certain committees now. The Wilfs, somewhere in the middle, I think, in Minnesota. Green Bay has been on certain committees. When Mark Murphy was the president, he's a former player. He was on health and safety, for instance. So different owners pick their strengths. Michael Bidwill in Arizona is pretty active. He's a former prosecutor, so he's on a variety of committees that kind of overlap, like fan behavior, player discipline, those kinds of things that he is more familiar with. And Jed York is another one. In San Francisco. He's kind of more involved. But you get Jody Allen in Seattle, and her brother Paul, who bought the team, now deceased, almost never comes to meetings.
Oh,
Not almost ghost like, so there are certain owners who just aren't involved, or the owners' sons are more involved. You see some of that too. Arthur Blank used to be more involved. He stepped back a little bit. He's more engaged in his philanthropy now than he used to be. So yeah, it's kind of a mixture. I would say there's some activist or active owners, Jerry and Robert among them, a kind of middle group that are active but not as much, and then there's some that kind of just show up to the quarterly meetings, and that's kind of it.
well, that's good to know that the NFL isn't just owned by one type of people. I was thinking they were all like, hey, it's my way or the highway, and all 32 heads are butting heads because they all have their own plan. But it seems like it's more collaborative.
Yeah, it's an interesting contrast, right? You have these fabulously wealthy people, who come into the league. I mean, it's 6 billion now to buy a team, so you're not talking about a guy just waiting for his lottery ticket to come in. These guys are, they have big egos anyway before they showed up, and yet when they get in the room, it's a collective. They share all the money, the league money, 32 ways, and they have their opinions and differences, but it's more collective than confrontational most of the time. I would say there have been instances where the owners have butted heads. The decision on which team to move to Los Angeles about 10 years ago, that was pretty contentious. There were very strong opinions on both sides, whether the Rams should go from St. Louis or the Raiders and Chargers from California. That was one of those moments. The issue of Colin Kaepernick and the player protests, that was pretty divisive. There have definitely been issues where the owners have not been unified. It took them a lot of time to come to an opinion, let's put it that way, politely. But when it comes to making money, they're generally on the same page.
That's good. Um, so Commissioner Goodell has said in the past that he doesn't consider the NBA and Major League Baseball competition. Why is that?
He has a bigger vision, if you want to call it that. One of his former executives told me Roger wants to be seen he wants the NFL to be seen in the same light as Disney and the Vatican. Disney, meaning family friendly media company, and Vatican, meaning public institution
Oh,
that's kind of immovable, not the religion part of it, but just like this is an institution.
yeah.
And you started off by asking how do we get to this point where they're sort of 24/7 and the biggest water cooler topic in America. That's Rogers thinking. Like I want to be everywhere in media. That's where the money is. That's how we communicate with our fans. And I want to be known as an institution, a kind of immovable force of some sort. And baseball used to be that many years ago, but not in the same quite the same way. Rogers sort of trying to take it to a higher level.
You mentioned an immovable force. Is there anybody trying to move the NFL? Is there anyone trying to stop the NFL? Is there anyone trying to contain the NFL?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there are always issues of saturation. When we get to 18 games, we have games on what? Sunday night, Monday, Thursday. Sometimes we get Saturday. We get Black Friday games. After Thanksgiving, we now are on Christmas. Part of the NFL's the miracle, if you will, of the NFL is its scarcity. I'm old enough to remember when I would watch NFL film highlights on Saturday evenings of the previous week.
Mhm.
You think now of cable TV and the instant access and your cell phone, but that was like a big deal to watch all those national games I hadn't seen, and they were John Facenda was, narrating them. It was so quaint in that way, and that scarcity built up like anticipation. And if you start having games on Wednesdays and college has really done this, right? They've bled into so many more days, and I can't keep the colleges straight anymore, right? Boise State is playing Appalachia State on Wednesdays, and I think that's really kind of confusing to the fan. It doesn't feel special, and so that is a danger for the NFL that they're too much in our face, if you will. And I think going dark for a little while actually helps a little bit. Um, so that's one danger. The other is sort of demographics. The NFL is not alone in this, but the population of America is slowing, the growth, population growth. And so, look, the new fans that coming in, they're just fewer kids playing youth football. You add the concussion worries that some parents are putting their kids into baseball and soccer and other sports. And so that's a long-term worry that maybe there'll be fewer kids playing football. And if fewer kids play football, studies have shown this, that if you play a sport, you're much more likely to be a fan of that sport when you grow up. Well, if you play baseball instead of football or basketball instead of football, you're more likely to become an NBA fan instead of an NFL fan. So that's a longer term issue. And then, one of the league's potential solutions is to move overseas to add fans in other countries. And that also is a long term play because outside of North America, a little bit in Australia and Germany. Most people don't play American style football, so they have to teach fans how it or why it's interesting, and that's not easy. So that's where flag football comes in, kind of a cheap and easy way to learn the game.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say is the flag football has kind of kept those young people being able to play it because, like you said, the concussion issues, the parents are concerned about their children's health, but flag football is a really nice alternative.
Yep, yep, for sure. And that's also true here in the States. There's about, I don't know in Ohio now, but 25 states now have accredited flag football as a high school, an official high school sport, which frees up funding. It's also something girls can play and women can play. The NFL is now going to invest in a flag football league, a professional league, and then you have the Olympics in 2028. Yeah, there's a lot of momentum behind it. And again, this is a hallmark of the NFL. These ideas started years ago. They are like an old-fashioned running game, blocking and tackling, pulling guards, and then just I grew up a Dolphins fan, so Larry Zonka just pounding the ball. They're not so much the Hail Mary passes, Montana to Jerry Rice. Boy, I'm dating myself. You can do Marino to Duper, whatever, take your pick. Um, so they are very deliberate. There's this conception, this idea that the NFL must be progressive, business-like, because they're the biggest. And in actuality, they're very deliberate. They let the other leagues go first. You think about international, think about gambling, think about private equity. They let the other leagues try it first and then watched and took their time. And you can do that when you're the most powerful and the richest league.
Great. Well, Ken, it has been a pleasure having you on the show today. We've learned a lot about the NFL, some surprises, some stuff, that we wouldn't have thought would have been the case. So it's been quite interesting. But our listeners definitely need to check out your new book, Every Day is Sunday, how Jerry Jones, Roger Kraft, or Robert Kraft, and Roger Goodell turned the NFL into the cultural and economic juggernaut. Before we let you go, where on social media, where on the web should they find more about you and about it?
My Twitter handle is L Belson, EL underscore Belson, Belson. I'm also on LinkedIn and I'm on Instagram, Tokyo Titan 2020. So a little bit of everywhere. Of course, New York Times website, I write for the business section. And every day is Sunday. You can just Google it. I have a website for that as well.
Excellent. Well, it has been a pleasure. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.